Welcome to Biz Meds with Darris and Saad, where we give you the medications for your business. This podcast is all about the minimum effective doses you need to make a massive improvement in your business. Listen and enjoy.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Biz Meds. We are your hosts. My name is Saad.
And I'm Darris.
So, for today's topic, we want to talk about...
Jump right in.
For today's topic, we want to talk about something that business owners continuously keep running into. It's a wall that inevitably sooner or later you run into because there's all of this, propaganda online where...
that was a really nice way of saying that.
There's all these
productivity porn gurus, as we call them.
Yeah. That's definitely coined by you, isn't it?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think I've ever heard anyone else say it.
I've never heard anybody else say that.
So to be fair, I mean, it's really all the so-called gurus. They're running around basically saying you have to optimize every second of your life, and you have to be productive from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, and yeah, really what it's leading to is I would say, pandemic level of what the things we're going to talk about today, which is overwhelm and burnout. And I think we're seeing more and more of it happening because of this idea that you have to continually hustle. Yeah. You have to go out, 36 hours a day.
Yeah, operating at 100%.
100% of the time. You're relentless, you don't give up. And I think people get so caught up in that mindset that what they don't really realize is how quickly they are actually causing themselves to go into this overwhelm and burnout. Down, yeah. And we'll talk a little bit about it today, but there are actual studies, scientific studies done on it, and what the effects are of overwhelm and burnout and what the differences are between those. And really at the end of the day, what we want to get to is that, hey, this is happening, and we see so many business owners that are running into this, and most of them aren't even aware that this is happening. And okay, so what is it? How do you start to be able to deal with it, and what are some effective strategies?
Yeah.
And
so
from there.
Sorry, just to cut you off there, you just dropped it in the middle. The topic that we're going to talk about today is overwhelm and burnout.
Yeah.
And sorry, were you going to say something?
No, I was just saying, that's really the key today, is because it is becoming more and more of an issue that I think we have a responsibility to cut out a lot of the noise around it.
Yeah.
And this false narrative there is around, people take such great pride in saying, oh, I work 20 hours a day and great. But I never think that's actually the case. I think it tells a good story, but I don't think it's actually not the most productive way of getting things. It's not the most efficient way of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's nice. Well, sorry, I'm speaking from the perspective of a business owner. Sometimes when you're doing a lot of work and then you share it with people, they're like, "Oh wow, you're doing that. I can't even fathom doing that. That's insane.
Yeah.
You're crushing it, man." And then you feel like some type of superiority over the others. And the reality is you're just not being effective with your time. You're not doing the most important things appropriately.
Perpetually busy. Right? That's the idea. Sometimes there's a lot of ego wrapped up in feeling like, oh, I got to be busy all the time.
Yeah.
And what you're inevitably doing is creating so much more burnout and overwhelm in your life than you need to. And we're here to peel that apart and say, okay, let's look at what these actually mean. So from a definition standpoint, overwhelm is really just a feeling of being buried under too many responsibilities, right? That's that feeling of overwhelm, or there's just so much that feels overwhelming.
Yeah.
It's really simplistic. Versus burnout, which is an actual state of chronic stress. And that can lead to emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion, or a combination of those. So it's two very different things, but, it's really common for business owners to experience that. And sometimes just understanding what the definition is will help people be able to put a definition to it and name to it, and that will help the awareness part of it.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. So let's talk more about like how does that, sorry, well, I'm just losing the train of thought. I was like, let's talk a bit more about like why business owners face, these high levels of pressure and responsibility. Like why is it that it's such a common issue that everybody runs into?
I think we talked about it in many of the episodes, and we'll continue to talk about it, is that the business owner, typically they have lives of, I need to do more. I need to do X amount more. Oh, no one else is going to be able to do it as well as I am, so I do it. Or every opportunity looks like a great opportunity, I'm going to do that. And it's and so it's additive.
Yeah.
Always adding more and never pulling things off their plates. And especially when you're starting out at the beginning, there is a skill to being able to shift from being the one that does everything to then being able to have other people, hiring people. And there's a tremendous amount of learning that has to go into that as well, to know how to do that and being able to do it mentally, to let things go and start managing versus doing the things all the time.
Yeah.
So that it would be one of the biggest contributing factors as to why that happens.
Okay. That's a good point. Yep.
So, and then with that, I think it's really important because this leads to, like, this is such a negative, can be such a negative impact on people's well-being, like in all areas,
right?
That we'll continue to talk about it because it's so important. And we say that, I think it's also really important to know that just because it's been like that doesn't mean that story is written in stone. It doesn't mean like that's just the way it is. The whole reason of this conversation is that we're going to give you hope that it actually does not have to be like that.
Yeah.
There are better ways. There are much better and other ways to do that. So you do not have to be continually overwhelmed and burned out.
Yeah. And that's kind of what we try to strive for with these topics and podcasts. Is these are issues that everybody has one time or another run into, right? And there are solutions out there. A lot of times you feel, or business owners feel like they got to do it on their own. They don't take the time to look for the resources. So we're, again, hoping that this is a all-encompassing, all-in-one place. We have the answers that are tried and true.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about like what the neuroscience is around what happens to the brain when we experience more of the chronic burnout. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, chronic stress affects the brain, particularly the frontal cortex. And this is just coming straight from actual studies that are, we're not making this up.
Yeah. So if you're interested, we'll have it in the show notes, but the actual supporting study is done by A.F. Arnsten. It was 2009. And the study is called Stress Signaling Pathways That Impair Prefrontal Cortex Structure and Function, and which is in the Nature Reviews Neuroscience. So we'll have it in the show notes. If you want to look it up, go ahead, continue on. What happens to the prefrontal cortex when you...
So particularly the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for the decision-making part, and the amygdala, which is kind of the backside over here, which processes emotions. Chronic stress causes the prefrontal cortex to shrink and impairing judgment. So when you're in the middle of making decisions, you're not making the best type of decisions. And while the amygdala, the piece in the back, becomes more hyperactive, leading to more emotional-based responses and just building on more like stress
Right.
further.
Which further, I guess, confirms and reaffirms when we say when emotion goes up, intelligence goes down, right?
Yes.
So
It's
it's
just
really
what's-
interesting to know. And so there's one thing to have a lot of energy tapping out the prefrontal cortex, which again is responsible for that decision-making part. But when you're overtaxing it, but when you're in prolonged times of burnout, that chronic stress, it actually can cause it to shrink, which is really interesting. So you're even at a worse case scenario. So not only are you dealing with limited amount of resources, but you're dealing now with much less available resources and cognitive function to be able to make good decisions. So you will actually, your runway to make good decisions gets shorter and shorter and shorter every day, the longer you are exposed to chronic stress like that.
Yeah. And the more you're pulling on it, the less, exactly how you said, elastic it becomes.
Yeah.
Over time, it's just going to snap.
Yeah. And if you are in that, so then there's the other element, which is cortisol. So if you're not aware, cortisol is our stress hormone. And in certain circumstances, having a stress response is really important. So a bear comes at you in the woods, like you want some cortisol and some adrenaline to kickstart, and it's going to give you that stress response, which is good. It's probably going to save your life, or at least make you do something.
Yeah.
Now, when it's elevated, like that's again when we're in that chronic elevated chronic stress mode, right? With the amygdala functioning really high, we're highly emotional response. The cortisol levels are going to be high for long periods of time. While that's also going to contribute to the feeling of irritableness, fatigue, and it's also going to impair our cognitive function. So the more we're in that state, the more stress hormone we have, it impairs how we feel. And then, we go home at the end of the day, you don't feel like you can turn off. Yeah. In fact, you're just more irritable, you're more tired, you don't make good decisions. Yeah. So your health most likely is also going to deteriorate even more because you don't have the ability to make a better decision around, should I eat that 5 pounds of ice cream or that whole chocolate cake or the broccoli, apple pie or all of them, you joke around, but that's really ultimately what's going to happen is we don't even have that quote unquote, the willpower. We don't have the decision-making capability anymore because we're in such a chronic state of stress because of all those things that have been added to our plate. And unless we're able to peel those things back, well, that's going to continue the cycle, and it becomes a downward cycle, a downward spiral, because it doesn't, unless you're able to put the brakes on and do that, it's not going to help. So
I saw a visual of somebody talking about how cortisol works. It's, it starts at the very bottom at the beginning of your day, and then it kind of ramps up and it goes up. Say the max is 100. If you get to 100, that's kind of a sign that you now need to take a little bit of break. But we as humans don't have that, odometer just showing us that, you're maxing out. But, by the end of the day, the whole point is to kind of unwind. But if you keep going up and you never let it come back down, it's just going to fluctuate higher and higher. And you're going to keep coming back into amygdala being the one making the amygdala part of the brain being the one making the decisions. And
well, either going to be emotional response based versus more logical thought through, where you have your prefrontal cortex actually having the bandwidth to make those better decisions.
Yeah.
And then we talked a little bit about, so that's the neuroscience of the idea between, burnout and overwhelm is really like, it's kind of like the sister act to that. It usually is the contributing factor that enables more and more of that burnout to occur.
Yeah.
Because we're overwhelmed, there's too many things, we feel like there's no real way through. That adds more stress, that adds more to the plate, and it's harder to get out of that cycle. And then of course, then you look at it and there's all sorts of symptoms that arise from it. And this was really funny enough. We talk about this, but this was the catalyst for really me discovering that little known part of neuroscience and psychology called flow, was because of this exact, like, burnout and overwhelm, this exact thing.
And the symptoms you came into, after. Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. So not only the physical, the emotional, but also like the mental, everything. So when we talk about the emotional symptoms, right? So you're irritable, you're a cynic, so you're just really negative about everything. It's, and for someone like myself who is I like to believe I'm the eternal optimist. It's a very hard thing to reconcile when suddenly you are really negative about a lot of things, and you're like, okay, well, what is going on? Like when I think about that, what is happening that is now causing me to feel that way?
Yeah. I remember you when you shared that story as well. You were talking specifically about how like you didn't know what you were doing and why you were doing what you were doing. You just kept doing it.
Yeah. And there's also the feeling of being lost. There's so many options you don't know what to do, but you're also trying to feel like you're trying really hard and nothing seems to work. But there's also the physical symptoms of, I am exhausted.
Yeah.
Right? I'm talking, I've said this before. It was, I couldn't keep my eyes open, and we're talking like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm falling asleep because I'm so exhausted and wondering, and I'm looking around like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
How are these other people functioning? Because I seem to be giving it my all, feel like I'm giving my all, but I have nothing left. I don't have anything. Yeah. And that's a really hard thing to reconcile too. It's like, oh, what is going on? And that was the beginning of the journey to really find, oh, how do you actually deal with that? How do you take care of that? How do you understand what's happening and what's causing this to happen? So if you're out there and you're feeling like no matter what you're doing, you're just not getting anywhere, or you're always exhausted and tired, that's probably a pretty good indication that you are exhibiting signs of overwhelm and burnout.
Well, this funny not really funny. It's kind of sad because so many people are going through it, and they just keep going through because they don't know that there's actually help out there.
You don't know what
there's
you're doing.
Tools out there. Yeah, it kind of upsets me sometimes because I was like, I wasn't aware of it up until it happened to me.
Yep.
And then I became hyper aware of it whenever I see other people going through it. But other people, they have to go through their own journey to figure out like, all right, this is not the right way.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about a few strategies around, simple things that you can do to minimize or help to reduce the amount of overwhelm and burnout.
We can implement immediately to see results.
Yeah. So do you want to kick it off?
So one of the most important things is obviously establishing boundaries and managing workload.
Yeah.
We've talked about this previously, where a lot of business owners will think that everything has to go through them. Everything needs their approval. Everything needs their final stamp on it.
Or they have to do it.
Or they have to do it from start to finish. And even though they have star players on their team, but they're just not giving them the opportunity to, fully take that on. So first thing that can immediately, I'm not going to get too much into detail because we've talked about it in our previous podcast, and just to kind of highlight the things that are important. One of the most important things, obviously, is setting up the boundaries and having the ability to say no to the things that are not serving the greater purpose or helping you achieve what it is that you're looking to accomplish with the business. Again, going back to one of our previous podcasts, a lot of business owners say yes to everything and then realize that they're saying no to, their business growth and their success and
what their actual goals are.
Exactly. Yeah. So.
Okay. That's a good one.
Yeah. Do you want to take the next one?
Well, I mean, I think following that is the idea of being able to, so what is the things you're saying no to? And then it is, if you're going to say something, yes to something, how evaluate whether or not you have to be the one that actually does the work, or do you have someone on your team or a way on your team to ensure that it gets done and you just hold it accountable to get done. So the easy thing says delegation, right? We're not saying, we're not abdicating responsibility. We don't ever want that. We want to make sure that the delegation is happening.
Yeah.
Right. So looking at what other resources. So this is where the questions, where the quality of the question determines the quality of the outcome. So the first question is, okay, in this scenario, if it's important, do I need to be the one that needs to get it done, or what other ways could this actually be accomplished and be completed? Right?
Yeah.
And utilizing that and coming up with really good ways to do that. You kick off. Yeah, I know we have another one.
Yeah.
Just an easy one. This is probably
this is
one of the easiest wins of them all.
But the funny thing about that is I feel like it's in this podcast I hear it the most. It's you and I, we talk about it the most because, again, going back to the productivity porn gurus, they're constantly telling you just keep going. You got this. Like there's light at the end of the tunnel. You just keep pushing
Do your code plunge.
Yeah. And it wasn't up until I know in the first podcast we launched, the first episode, you talked about it, rest and recovery. Rest and recovery is one of the biggest catalysts to success. It's funny because people don't realize the importance of sleep and how that affects your brain and how it helps, get your neurochemicals recharged, and gives you the ability to take on the next day.
Yep.
Whereas this whole hustle culture and grind culture does not ever, I've never heard anybody ever, emphasize the importance of sleep. So
yeah,
and it's funny because it's right in front of you. It's a very basic one, but it's an important one. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I mean, yeah, it is. It's a really important one, but it's the most overlooked one because we all think that there's this magic bullet out there that's going to magically solve everything. And I'm sorry, there just isn't. There really isn't. You have to take care of your rest and recovery, right? That's why it's such an important part of the flow cycle, right? It's in the science that you have to be able to have recovery built in. And we're talking about sleep, but we're also talking about more active recovery. And we're not going to go too much into it, but it's not sitting on the couch, drinking a beer and watching TV. Like that is not active recovery. That is the
brain rot.
Well, it's not even that, but you are still consuming mental energy processing information.
Yeah.
Right. So you're watching TV, you are still, whether or not you know it, you're processing all of the sound, visual and everything. So you're not actually giving your brain any downtime.
Yeah.
So versus, I'm going to maybe go for a walk, right? No headphones, just go for a walk in nature and looking at larger vistas, which allows different parts of your brain to start processing information and making different connections, or, going for a soak or going for a steam bath or something like that, or just having some quiet time. Like those are much more effective active recovery things than sitting on the couch, having a drink and watching the game or whatever it is. Yeah. So there's a difference between active and passive recovery. Yeah. And that's what we want to do is make sure we're getting a lot of sleep, quality sleep in, and those things tend to not be done really well. Yeah. Like those are kind of like the major ones. And there's, if you're interested, there was a whole study done on sleep in 2017. It's called Why We Sleep, Unlocking the Power of Sleep and Dreams. That was done by MP Walker. And again, that's a study that'll be linked in the show notes as well. There's a whole study. I think there's a whole TEDx talk on sleep and what happens when you don't get enough rest and things like that. So, I think that the one that goes along with that is really kind of like one more kind of easy thing to do is that idea of mindfulness.
Yeah. You pretty much touched on that with, just being mindful out being active, being
Yeah, that's the more active recovery thing is sometimes, we talked about it before, is that mindfulness or gratitude part of it really goes a long way. Yeah. And we convince ourselves that we're too busy for things, which guess what, now contributes to more overwhelm and burnout. So we want to be really aware of what's going on there.
Yep, absolutely.
How about you? Why don't you talk about the last one, or one of the last ones? This isn't a comprehensive list. This is just kind of minimum effective doses. Where will you get the biggest bang for your buck?
Yeah.
Right? Like right off the bat to help you manage burnout and overwhelm.
Yeah. This is not going to come with a surprise, mostly because of all of our gym analogy.
No way.
But not even just the gym, like just in general physical activity.
Right.
Giving your body, once you get your body moving, just the chemicals and the endorphins and all of that your body releases helps with mental recovery.
I could be completely wrong with me attributing this quote, but I'm pretty sure back in the day, I think there was something, I think it was Tony Robbins said that motion creates emotion, right? So if you're feeling like you are not having a great day, or you're whatever it is, that motion, that physical motion and activity can help create that more positive emotion right off the bat. So, and it's funny because we think, when we're not feeling great, the key is to not doing anything. It's actually
to
the
do
opposite.
Yeah.
You need to do something.
Exactly.
I know there's many times where before I go to martial arts and I'm just like, oh man,
don't want to do it.
I'm like, my head's going a million miles an hour. We're in the middle of a marketing campaign. We are, doing all these things. We're building all this stuff. And then it's, I don't feel like going. But of course, every time I go, I'm like, man, so glad I went, because now I have more mental clarity.
Yeah.
And it quiets so much of that stuff to help us allow to kind of keep moving forward.
Yeah. So the last one was physical activity. And when we say physical activity, it's just as Darris mentioned here, it's not specifically just working out at the gym. That might not be the cup of tea for everybody.
Yep.
So just anything that helps you kind of get out of your regular, pushes you, challenges you a bit more on the physical end. Could be a hike, could be, going golfing, could be playing sports. So anything, just physical activity.
Yeah. All right. I think that's a good place to kind of wrap this up. And I think that, all right, so this is where we'll say, so we're talking about burnout and overwhelm and the neurological, the neuroscience and the psychological impact of those, and what they are, what happens, what it actually physically happens to the brain. Some really key, easy ways to start peel that back. And this is where we'll say, this is where we actually built the masterclass to get even more results much faster and peel you back out of that overwhelm and burnout, which is why the masterclass is called Burnout to Breakthrough, because in just under an hour, you will have solid, actionable steps and things done to reclaim your life. So if you haven't already, in the link below in the show notes, there's a link to the masterclass. Just sign up with your email. Your instant access is completely free to you. This is we just want to see you succeed, which is why we built this. So it comes with the workbook. Take your time, go through it, but in under an hour, you're going to have some really amazing results, and you're going to feel an immediate effect of being able to understand burnout and get yourself to breakthrough. So I want to say thank you to everyone who's joined us. If you're new or you've been along for the whole ride, we thank you. We appreciate it. If there's anything that you've liked or learned, please share it with someone. That's how we get the word out. That's how we help business owners. To Saad's mom, love you. Thank you. My mom, love you. Thank you. Everyone, we love you. We thank you. And remember, you are just one day away from the life you've always dreamed about. Thank you. And we will see you in the next episode.